Sometimes the most remarkable stars emerge from unexpected places, and their stories are woven from threads of talent, resilience, heartbreak, and triumph. Today we're exploring one such story, the life and legacy of Vivian Vance, a comedic genius who illuminated television screens for decades, even if her personal struggles were often hidden behind her radiant smile. Maybe you've seen her in black and white reruns, providing the perfect counterbalance to Lucille Ball's zany antics, or you've caught glimpses of her name in the credits of classic sitcoms. But how many of us truly know the sweeping, complicated journey that carried Vivian from a small Midwestern town to the forefront of American entertainment? Pull up a seat and settle in, because her life wasn't just about playing the sidekick. It was a bold statement about resilience, comedic artistry, and the powerful bonds of friendship. Vivian Roberta Jones was born on July 26, 1909, in Cherryvale, Kansas. She was the second of 6 children. Her early life didn't exactly scream future Hollywood star. Her family, like many around them, was trying its best to find stability in the heartland. She grew up amid a swirl of everyday routines, church gatherings, school pageants, and good old-fashioned small-town chatter. But though money was tight, that never really stopped Vivian from dreaming. She had a habit of performing mini-shows in the family living room, roping her younger siblings into comedic sketches that featured makeshift costumes made from old curtains and comedic monologues that would make her parents roll their eyes one minute and beam with pride the next. Still, Vivian's mother, known for her strict religious views, often regarded Vivian's theatrical passions with wary disapproval. She wanted her daughter to pursue something less unpredictable than the arts, but Vivian had a stubborn streak that refused to let go of her dreams. To truly understand Vivian Vance, it helps to peek into the era that shaped her. In the early 1900s, small-town America was steeped in a traditional social structure that prized conformity. The concept of forging a career on the stage, particularly for a woman, was regarded with suspicion, and the entertainment business itself was hardly considered respectable by conservative standards. That said, there was also a changing cultural tide that was impossible to ignore. By the late 1920s and early 1930s, vaudeville and Broadway musicals were full of singers, dancers, and comedic performers who broke free from stuffy conventions. Jazz music soared through radio waves, and Hollywood's golden age was beginning to gather steam. For someone like Vivian, who had the triple gift of comedic timing, vocal ability, and natural poise, the stage and one day the screen offered a glimmer of freedom she could never find in Cherryvale. By her teenage years, Vivian had become more outspoken about her dream to pursue acting. Looking back on that time, there's a story quietly recounted by one of her childhood friends in a later interview about how Vivian once snuck out of the house late at night to perform in a local amateur theater competition. She was said to have borrowed an old frock and pinned it together for a quick costume. Legend has it that her performance was so mesmerizing that even the modest crowd of about 50 people gave her a standing ovation. However, when she arrived home, she faced her mother's stern disapproval. The two had a monumental argument, the kind that echoed through the house and rattled the younger siblings. It set the tone for Vivian's early years, her passion for performance clashing painfully with her family's expectations. But in that argument, Vivian made a quiet vow. She would find a way to make it. Her mother's concerns about morals and stability would have to wait. When she turned 18, Vivian made a brave, if somewhat naive, decision to leave Kansas behind. She headed first for Albuquerque, New Mexico, hoping that a slightly bigger city would jumpstart her stage ambitions. It wasn't exactly Broadway, but it was far enough from Cherryvale that she felt a surge of independence. There, She joined a local theater troupe, adopting the stage name Vivian Vance. The name sounded punchier, more vibrant, and easier to fit onto theater playbills. She used her strong singing voice to land small roles in local productions, and she honed her comedic instincts by testing out new ways of delivering lines for maximum laughs. No role was too small, and no opportunity was beneath her. She was building up her confidence and name recognition bit by bit. Yet life as a struggling actress was anything but glamorous. Vivian slept in rundown boarding houses, often skipping meals so she could pay for voice lessons. She took odd jobs between gigs, sometimes as a hat check girl, sometimes behind the counter of a modest cafe, to scrape together enough to stay afloat. The emotional toll was heavy, especially for someone raised in a conservative environment. She recalled feeling bouts of guilt for disobeying her mother, and there were nights she'd cry herself to sleep, unsure if she was making the right choices. But every time she stepped on stage, she felt that flicker of certainty returning. Audience laughter was, in many ways, her lifeline, urging her forward, telling her that she wasn't wrong to try. Eventually, the local spotlight started to shine on her with greater intensity. Within Albuquerque circles, Vivian Vance grew to be known as the comedian you simply had to see, a dynamic performer who would belt out show tunes one minute and crack a joke in perfect comedic timing the next. In a local production rumored to have been a musical farce, she stole the show with both her comedic timing and her genuine sense of warmth. This success emboldened her. Broadway was calling, and though the cost of a trip to New York seemed astronomical, Vivian decided she'd figure out a way to make it happen. By the early 1930s, she found herself in the hustle and bustle of New York City. If she thought Albuquerque was challenging, New York was a different beast entirely. But the city also offered endless possibilities. She auditioned for chorus lines, comedic roles, anything that would get her foot in the door. After numerous rejections, near bankruptcy moments, and a few teary episodes of self-doubt, she landed her first true Broadway gig in the musical Music in the Air. It was a small part, but it placed her on a legitimate stage in the heart of the theater world. Her comedic flair and vocal talent earned her respect from fellow cast members, and more roles trickled in. She found herself performing alongside legends of the stage, absorbing every nuance of stagecraft, comedic timing, and audience engagement. During this time, she also went through her first marriage. The details of her personal relationships can be tough to piece together because Vivian was both private and at times heartbreakingly unlucky in love. Her first marriage to a musician she'd met while performing ended quickly, partly due to professional jealousy and partly due to the whirlwind chaos of show business. It was an emotionally bruising experience, and she seldom discussed it publicly, preferring to pour her energy into her craft. There's an anecdote from a stagehand who claimed that during the final weeks of that marriage, you could see Vivian quietly rehearsing comedic lines backstage through tears. Yet when the curtain rose, she was all smiles, never letting the pain seep into her performance. In many ways, this ability to mask heartbreak with humor would become a hallmark of her life. The mid-1930s saw her career on a cautious upswing. She found steady work in a series of Broadway productions, including the musical Hooray for What? With Ed Wynn. Word of her stage presence spread, and while she was never the headliner, she won plenty of positive notices from theater critics who praised her comedic timing and vocal prowess. By now, she'd begun to refine her comedic style, part self-deprecating, part empathetic observer, and always delivering zingers that lit up the audience. She also developed a gift for physical comedy, little gestures and expressions that would later be invaluable in the world of television. Yet with every professional step forward, Her personal life remained tumultuous. She married again, this time to a journalist. This second marriage was equally short-lived. Rumors circulated that Vivian's devotion to the stage and her constant search for the next role created tension at home. By the time the 1940s rolled around, she was single yet again, wearing the label twice divorced, which at that time was frowned upon by many. But her resilience was unwavering. Heartbreak never stopped her. She pushed forward with purpose, not in spite of pain, but alongside it. A major turning point arrived when she caught the eye of producer and theatrical impresario George Abbott, who recognized her comedic gifts and placed her in key supporting roles. The experience refined her craft and boosted her reputation. Her comedic timing, honed through countless stage nights, was inching toward perfection. She was the sort of performer who could transform an ordinary line into something unforgettable. Audiences adored her, but the path to stardom remained steep. Hollywood beckoned from across the country with its glamorous promise, and by the early 1940s, Vivian decided to give the silver screen a shot. So she packed her suitcases once more, stepping onto a train bound for Los Angeles, feeling that tingle of possibility stirring in her blood. Landing in California, Vivian realized that Hollywood was radically different from the New York theater world. Out there, it was all about screen tests, smiling for the camera, and waiting for a big break that might never arrive. Initially, she landed minor film roles. Blink and you'll miss her appearances in B-movies, roles that left her overshadowed by marquee names. To make ends meet, she'd do the occasional radio spot or stage performance in local clubs. The unpredictability of the film industry was daunting, and she sometimes found herself pining for the familiarity of the stage. But there was no ignoring the fact that moving pictures had become the dominant form of popular entertainment. If she wanted to succeed, she needed to adapt. Around this time, she also juggled a few health issues. Long hours, inconsistent work, and mounting stress led to what she later described as a nervous collapse. For a brief period, she retreated from the limelight, seeking rest and counseling. It was in that period of quiet introspection that she confronted some of her childhood scars. Her mother's disapproval, the guilt of pursuing a dream that seemed to deviate from her family's values, and the heartbreak of her failed marriages. By confronting these demons, she gained a deeper understanding of her own resilience. She returned to work revitalized, determined that if Hollywood wasn't going to come knocking on her door, she would find a way to carve her own path. Of course, fate works in mysterious ways. Her big break didn't come from some major film studio. Instead, it came through the synergy of two comedic powerhouses, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. The couple was developing a television project called I Love Lucy, a new sitcom that CBS would air in 1951. They needed a sidekick for Lucy Ricardo, a best friend figure who could both complement and challenge Lucy's on-screen persona. The role of Ethel Mertz was pivotal, the comedic foil, the indispensable partner in Lucy's harebrained schemes. It demanded not only comedic skill, but also a warm, endearing presence that viewers could trust. After auditioning numerous actresses, the producers set their sights on Vivian Vance. She had the comedic chops, the stage background, and the sense of earnest likability that made her perfect for the part. Legend has it that Lucille Ball initially had reservations about casting Vivian because she found her almost too glamorous and too svelte to play a frumpy landlady. Ball wanted Ethel to look more ordinary. In fact, there are rumors that Ball asked the costume department to downplay Vivian's natural beauty, making her wear less flattering outfits to ensure Lucy would remain the comedic focus. Although Vivian was somewhat disheartened by these aesthetic constraints, she knew that Hollywood could be brutally competitive. If wearing ill-fitting dresses and appearing slightly frumpy was what it took, she was willing to do it. So she took on the role of Ethel Mertz, and it ended up changing her life forever. When I Love Lucy premiered in October 1951, it was an instant hit, rocketing Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz, William Frawley, and Vivian Vance to stardom. At the heart of this comedic masterpiece was the friendship between Lucy and Ethel. The pair got into mischief involving chocolate factories, ballet lessons, and disastrous attempts at household management. Audiences couldn't get enough of this dynamic duo, Lucy the outrageous dreamer, Ethel the more grounded but easily persuaded partner in crime. It was comedic magic. Vivian's deft timing, wide array of facial expressions, and ability to play both the straight woman and comedic sidekick made her a fan favorite. She even won an Emmy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 1954, a milestone that few supporting actresses had achieved at that time. However, behind the scenes there was tension, particularly with William Frawley, who played her on-screen husband, Fred Mertz. Their relationship was notorious for being prickly. Frawley was significantly older and could be gruff and sharp-tongued. Off camera, the two traded barbs, and while they managed to keep their disagreements largely under wraps for the sake of the show, the friction was real. There were whispers around the studio that Frawley resented Vivian's comedic prominence and that he was set in his old-school ways, sometimes clashing with her more progressive approach to performance. In fact, decades later, a studio insider recalled that if those two were left alone in a room for too long, you could expect an argument by the time the door opened again. Yet ironically, their on-screen chemistry worked, perhaps precisely because of that underlying tension, which added a certain spark to Fred and Ethel's bickering. Equally complex was Vivian's relationship with Lucille Ball. On screen, they were best friends, and in real life, they developed a deep bond. Lucy recognized Vivian's talent and was appreciative of her comedic gifts. The two became confidants, often sharing personal struggles, including Lucy's tricky marriage to Desi Arnaz and Vivian's own bouts of heartbreak. But there was also an undercurrent of rivalry, inevitable when one was the show's star and the other was a gifted performer in her own right. Lucy had an undeniable star power, and sometimes that overshadowed Vivian's contributions. Yet they maintained a sincere affection and professional respect for each other, forging a friendship that would endure even as their lives took them down separate paths. At the show's peak, Vivian found herself navigating sudden fame in a culture that wasn't always gentle with its stars. Fans recognized her wherever she went, sometimes calling her Ethel on the street or jokingly asking, "Where's Lucy?" While she appreciated the warm response, she also wanted her own identity. She sometimes felt the weight of being forever linked to a supporting role. She was also becoming aware that success in Hollywood didn't necessarily equate to personal happiness. There were still unsettled chapters in her personal life. She married and divorced a third time during her I Love Lucy years, and the media's gossip columns took notice. Though she tried to keep personal matters out of the spotlight, Hollywood tabloids were quick to pounce on any sign of relationship trouble. After the final curtain fell on Lucy and Desi's collaboration, Vivian briefly tried to stake out a path separate from the I Love Lucy brand. She took on roles in stage plays and pursued comedic parts that let her break free from the Ethel Mertz persona. She was also grappling with a sense of exhaustion. Years of relentless production schedules, plus the emotional toll of her personal dramas, left her drained. Yet, in the midst of this transitional phase, she had a flicker of hope in her private life. She met and married her fourth husband, John Dodds, and the two relocated to Connecticut in search of a quieter, more peaceful existence away from Hollywood's incessant glare. This relationship seemed to bring her more stability than her previous ones. She and Dodds took joy in entertaining close friends, including Lucille Ball, who would occasionally visit. It was during these quieter years that Vivian found a renewed sense of self-worth, free from constant on-set pressures. Still, Lucy wasn't ready to let go of her trusted partner in comedy. In the 1960s, Lucy launched The Lucy Show, and a few years later, Here's Lucy. Vivian made guest appearances on both, though she was careful not to lock herself into a full-time contract again. She wanted the freedom to explore other creative avenues, to accept stage roles that made her heart soar. Nonetheless, every time she stepped back into Lucy's television world, even for a short stint, audiences erupted with delight, reminding her just how integral she was to this comedic legacy. There's a story from a later interview in which Vivian joked that whenever she thought she'd finally shaken off the ghost of Ethel Mertz, Lucy would call, offering her an irresistible cameo. She'd laugh good-naturedly, knowing there was a bond with Lucy that went beyond career moves. Throughout the 1960s and early 1970s, Vivian Vance's public presence became more sporadic. She picked her projects carefully. Gone were the days when she'd scramble for every gig. She now had the reputation and the financial security to be selective. A rarely discussed but poignant moment from this era involves Vivian's volunteer work at psychiatric hospitals. According to a family friend, Vivian, deeply affected by her own bouts of anxiety and depression earlier in life, would sometimes put on small comedic shows for patients, seeking to bring a little light to people who were struggling. She rarely mentioned this publicly, fearing it might look self-serving. But those close to her say these low-key volunteer visits were some of her proudest moments, off-camera glimpses of her empathy and kindness. Meanwhile, controversies from her past continued to occasionally bubble up. Gossip columns loved to dramatize her failed marriages and speculate about possible feuds with Lucille Ball. The drama with William Frawley remained a popular topic in fan circles, though both Vivian and Frawley had long since moved on with their professional lives. By this point, Frawley was no longer in the picture. He passed away in 1966, and Vivian rarely spoke of him publicly, except to offer polite acknowledgments of his comedic talents. She wasn't one to dwell on negativity, a choice that only added to her enduring image as a warm, compassionate, comedic actress. Nevertheless, her biggest heartbreak during these later years was watching Lucille Ball navigate the collapse of her marriage to D.C. Arnaz, and then forging a new chapter with her second husband, Gary Morton. While Lucy remained America's comedic queen, she also endured personal losses and challenges that sometimes weighed heavily on Vivian's heart. Their friendship, though it had its ups and downs, was something Vivian cherished. Those who were close to the pair say they could lean on each other like sisters, even through jealousy and bruised egos. Vivian once confided to a longtime friend that Lucy was the only person in Hollywood who truly got her, because they'd risen to prominence together, forging an unbreakable comedic bond on the set of I Love Lucy. In the mid-1970s, Vivian started to experience health issues that she initially brushed off as minor. But after repeated hospital visits, she received the devastating diagnosis of breast cancer. The news came as a heavy blow. Yet, in characteristic fashion, Vivian tried to maintain her sense of humor. She underwent a mastectomy and spoke candidly, though quietly, about her journey to close friends, emphasizing the importance of early detection and medical care. At a time when cancer discussions were still somewhat taboo, her openness was a rare show of courage. As the years progressed, the cancer spread to her bones. Her health declined steadily, and by 1979, it was clear that her time was running short. She returned to California, seeking proximity to close friends and medical specialists. In those final months, Lucille Ball was a frequent visitor, often coming to Vivian's bedside to share fond memories and laughter, even as they both knew the end was near. They reminisced about the early days, rehearsals at odd hours, Daisy's quirks, the audience's roars of laughter, and the countless comedic hijinks that cemented their partnership in television history. There's a poignant recollection from a close friend who witnessed one of these visits, describing how Lucy gently held Vivian's hand and told her how much she loved her, tears in her eyes. Vivian, for her part, joked that she was finally off the hook from playing Ethel, but admitted she'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. Vivian Vance passed away on August 17, 1979, at the age of 70, leaving behind a legacy as one of television's most beloved comedic actresses. But the controversies and debates around her life linger. Some critics argue that her comedic genius was undervalued because she was perpetually cast in a supporting role, overshadowed by Lucille Ball's star power. Others point to the occasional friction between Vivian and Lucy, wondering if Lucy truly recognized the extent of Vivian's contributions. There are also those who believe Vivian's comedic gifts influenced the shape of television sitcoms for decades, particularly in the nuanced art of the best friend role. Today, as we look back on her life, it's hard to ignore the complexities, the broken marriages, the tense relationships, and the persistent fight for her own identity in an industry that often demanded she play second fiddle. Despite all that, Vivian Vance's significance is enormous. She was, in many ways, a pioneer for comedic actresses, showing that the sidekick role could be deeply textured, brilliantly funny, and crucial to a show's success. Her partnership with Lucille Ball redefined how women could interact in sitcoms, collaborating as a comedic duo rather than just existing to highlight a male star. The portrayal of Lucy and Ethel continues to resonate with viewers, speaking to the depths of female friendship, loyalty, and the willingness to embark on ridiculous escapades side by side. Vivian's comedic style also laid groundwork for future generations of performers who recognize the value in balancing physical humor, witty banter, and genuine emotional warmth. Her story matters because it highlights how behind every iconic performance is a human being grappling with fears, insecurities, heartbreak, and longing for validation, an experience so many of us can relate to, whether we're in the spotlight or not. Looking at her entire journey, her humble beginnings in Cherryvale, her scrappy climb through small theater groups, her Broadway stints, and her eventual ascension to TV legend, what stands out most is her resilience. She faced rejection, divorce, health crises, and the indignities of an industry that didn't always champion her. Yet she held on to her sense of humor like a life raft, using it not only to entertain audiences but to navigate her personal battles. In the end, Vivian Vance reminds us that being the best friend on screen doesn't mean one's own story is any less gripping or important. Often, it's those who stand just off center stage who carry the emotional weight that fuels the entire production. And that's all for today's video. Don't forget to leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you'll always be in the loop. Thanks for watching.